As I trip over one.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. So this month we have a special presentation by Bill Iseminger, Mr. Mounds, and he's retired from Cahokia Mounds State World Heritage Site after more than 51 years of service. He's also an accomplished artist and author. The program is entitled Review of Some of the Prime and Unique Artifacts Ever Found in the Eastern United States. And he's going to review some of the prime examples of ancient Native American art and craftsmanship from many cultural periods in several media, including chipped and ground stone, bone, shell, pottery, minerals, wood, and more. So welcome.
I did a similar version of this sometime in the past, but I've added a lot of, probably doubled the number of artifacts and things, so, and probably each category that I talked about could be a separate program or lecture itself, but, and a lot of the things I'm depicting tonight came from some of the books you see up here, and from, as well as some from websites, etc. But, you know, we often find mostly broken stuff in our digs, but occasionally some of these really neat things show up either from controlled excavations or amateur excavations or surface collections and other sources. But I'm kind of doing it by categories here, if I can get it to work.
The one that says down.
Yep, that's what I'm, there we go. Oh, went back to the,
Go from current, from beginning, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, split down one.
that's what I was doing. I thought.
Aim it towards here. Aim it towards the computer. I hope.
Okay, try it again. So under chipstone, which is most of the times we're talking about what we call chert or flint, and these are some of the earliest examples of chipstone material from the U.S. Over here, the Clovis points. You can see the very classic forms with the basal flute that's very distinctive for that particular type of artifact. And obviously, even back then, they were looking for stone that has color or has certain qualities that they were looking for. And we see this throughout all these categories. They're doing some prime searches for just the right materials. As we get up a little more closer in time, from 8500 BC up until 400 AD, just again some prime examples of classic forms of spear points and knives from Dalton and Hardin and St. Charles points, the Lost Lake. Here we have Graham Cave. Here's a Dalton as well, and that one from Kentucky.
Cumberland.
Cumberland, thank you. But just a few examples. This one is made out of Knife River chalcedony, which comes from North Dakota and was found in Illinois. Then we have the Snyder's points and Dixon points. This one has an unusual name. It starts with an A. Anzac, I think is the name of it.
Calf Creek too sometimes.
It's in the same category, yeah. And then Thebes, and then what we call turkey tails. So these are, some from different time periods, but you can see each one is a good example of some of the classic flint knapping technology. And so that's kind of the focus. What I'm doing is trying to show prime examples of artifacts from different time periods. A lot of people don't realize that some of the earlier points are some of the fancier ones. As you get up in time, a lot of times you don't see as much of the precise and delicate flaking that you see in some of these examples. So those are mostly spear points and knives. Joe Glockner. Sorry, Joe. Talk to you later. He has worked with a lot of us in archaeology here in the area. So most of those things I showed you were, like I say, are spear points or knives. A lot of people call everything like that an arrowhead, but the arrowheads don't really come in until after about 400 or 500 AD. Suddenly we start seeing these little tiny points, because you can't have something big and heavy on the end of an arrow and shoot it with any distance and any accuracy. So we start seeing around the late woodland period these small stem points, and then we get into the Mississippian and into the Caddoan areas. We see more of the triangular with the side and basal notches and other forms, kind of exotic forms. But these are all attached, obviously, to shafts, tied on with sinew and usually some kind of a mastic or glue to help hold them on. And a lot of these spear points are on foreshafts, which could then be removed, and you could use the spear as a knife for butchering. So just to give you a little perspective there. What we call the Mackinac cache from up in the Illinois Valley, not too far from Peoria in that region. A lot of people think they're Hopewell or Middle Woodland, but the notching is a little bit different than what we see normally for that period. Usually you have bigger, wider notches for what we call Snyder's points. So there's some debate about just what they date to, but the fact that they're found in caches, I forget how many were in this particular cache, but quite a few, and that's more typical of this woodland period. Obsidian, we see this primarily in Illinois and in the eastern U.S. During the Middle Woodland period, or Hopewell period, about 2,000 years ago or so. And tests they've done on these suggest that and actually prove it. Most of it comes from the Yellowstone area. So someone made some big trips out west, or them coming here, either way, or somewhere in between. But it's a unique kind of material, very fragile, but it flakes very easily. It's very sharp, and it's used mostly for ritual objects. These would not be functional spears. It's something probably more for display in various kinds of ceremonies. We see chisels and other kinds of tools made out of a kaolin flint or chert that comes from down in southern Illinois. It's very colorful. And these are more typical forms that you see during the Mississippian period, but they're really prime examples. And the blades, or the bits where they're working in, have been ground down real smooth, so you have a nice, good cutting edge on them. As you can see exhibited here, so they've ground away the flake scars like you see along the edges, so it gives you a good, clean bit. Hoes, we start seeing some examples during late woodland times, but mostly in Mississippian times like the ones you see here. Large, I've seen one that's about 18 inches long. Most of them are about 12 inches or so. And these will be tied on or lashed onto an L-shaped handle, used like we use a hoe or a pick to break up the soil for agricultural purposes and other kinds of excavations. And just a good example here. This is kind of neat. It has a little history on it. Welpley collection from Madison County, Illinois, found in 1917 near Horseshoe Lake here in Illinois. Then these are the notch hoes. They probably have a little bit different function. They're digging tools, maybe tied onto L-shaped handles as well, but maybe some kind of a special kind of digging. Maybe after the fields have grown up and they're doing more of the cultivating and weeding, maybe that's what they're using these for. Or maybe digging the trenches for the house construction. Who knows for sure. But you can see the polish on the end, that's from wear, from the actual digging in the soil. The minerals in the soil and in the roots of the plants they're cutting through create this polish. And some of these are Mill Creek chert and some are kaolin chert. And they're found mostly in this general area of Illinois and Missouri. Some more of the ritual objects, we refer to these as maces. They would be held and displayed in some kind of ritual activity, not functional as tools. They'd be too fragile and could break fairly easily. You don't want to damage them, so they're more of a status symbol, much like a king would hold a scepter or something like that in modern times. But you can see very similar components. Most of them have this kind of bulge on the sides and a sort of a crown-like affair at the top. And these are all chipped out of chert, but notice this one and this one here, again, they've ground down with abrasive stones to get rid of all the chipping marks like you see on this one. So just imagine the amount of time that would take to grind something like that. Some people have suggested maybe it's a simulation of an atlatl with a banner sewn on it, and the hook would be up here. But there's all kinds of possible interpretations. But some may have been ritual forms of war clubs and things like that as well. These are chipstone spuds, which also have been ground down smooth. And this is the one here, just to show you the size with the hand in there for scale. And these are fairly common throughout the central Mississippi Valley area. But particularly, I think they're associated with Cahokia. And again, the majority of them are made out of kaolin chert. There are some that are made out of the Mill Creek chert or Burlington chert. But the kaolin chert's kind of special, usually very colorful, but also it's translucent. If you hold these things up to the light, a lot of times you can see light coming through them. And probably, again, there's some debate about whether they're functional tools or not, or the symbolic axes. Some of them show some wear in this area, like they've been hafted in a handle, perhaps used, or looking like an axe, but maybe just held, and again, in display. Don't find things like this too often. That comes from Tennessee, the Duck River area, and these things are about this long. They're just amazing. Imagine the control it would take to chip out something like that. Occasionally we do find effigy forms, sometimes in bird-like forms or lizards, and here's one shows a human in profile, the nose and the mouth and the hair bun at the back, and just a nice, perfect circular piece that came out of Missouri. And some of these knives from the Spiro site in Oklahoma. But again, some exquisite chipping in a lot of these artifacts. Then we have the other technology of chipstone. We had chipstone, now we're looking at groundstone. And these are made with a pecking and grinding process, usually with a hammer stone, and you peck on it. And every time you peck that piece of rock, you can see all these little dimples here. It pulverizes right where the hammer stone hits, and you just keep doing that until you get the shape roughed out. Then you can grind it on like a slab of wet sand, wet sandstone to get the polish, and some of them are fully polished. Some just have the bits polished, but and sometimes they were again selecting particular types of stone for their color and inclusions and other things as well as their functionality. This is probably my favorite artifact of all the ones I'm going to be showing you. It's a mold that's been carved out of a solid piece of diorite rock, and it's big. It's about this size, and it's just very exquisite. It's very thin, very delicate engraving, and representing some kind of a water bird. And this is from Alabama. I think maybe that was at the Moundville site. And here's a snapping turtle. It's kind of a bowl, and that came from the Spiro site in Oklahoma. So there's a lot of time that's involved in packing and grinding to get these shapes and engraving the designs in them. But just some of the detail you see in some of these is amazing. Chunky stones or discoidals. They start to appear in late woodland times, but are really prominent during Mississippian times and later into the historic period. We know from, they get documents from early explorers and settlers and historians that, who described the game as it was played as far north as the Mandans in North Dakota, but more common in the Mississippi Valley in the southeastern U.S. Made out of a variety of materials. The majority of them are, they're cupped on both sides. There are some that we call biscuit discoidals that they're not cupped like you see on these others. But again, they're selecting rocks and the types of rocks. A lot of it's a quartzite. There are some that are made out of probably a diorite. I really don't know all these types of stones. This is a group that was found in Mound 72 at Cahokia. There were 15 of them together. One of them was some more friable material that just disintegrated when they exposed it. But these are all made out of, for the most part, a quartzite. We think comes from southeastern Missouri. But the game, the way it was played, usually two men on a prepared field, would be rolled on its edge down the field, and they would throw lances or spears to where they thought it was going to stop rolling. Whoever's closest scored points. And a lot of wagering involved, and gambling on the outcomes, and the village champions, etc. And many of these were kept as almost like heirlooms and passed down, apparently, from generation to generation. So it's kind of the Mississippian primary sport, I guess you'd say. Ear spools. Most of these are coming from the Spiro Mound site, or related areas in Oklahoma and Arkansas. This one's from Illinois. But you can see this is the back side. So you would have an earlobe that you start out small and get bigger and bigger with these things as they got heavier. You're like buttoning one of those into your earlobe. And a lot of them, you can see the green staining. Apparently a lot of them had a copper foil applied to the surface, so it would be very bright and shiny. But some very interesting designs and motifs that we see through the various examples here. These are kind of unique. These are showing some kind of a raptor, a bird, probably a hawk or a falcon, with shell inlays for the eyes. That's from the Spiro site in Oklahoma. Tablets. You see earlier ones in the Adena culture, the early woodland, and mostly in Ohio area and related adjacent areas, showing very stylized bird figures for the most part. Like here's the beak and the eye and the neck, and these are the wings, and here's the talons or the feet down here. And This one's a little more complex to figure out, but kind of a mirror image of a couple birds there. And when we get into the Mississippian period, we're seeing more of the, in this case, birdman figures or cross-hatching on the back sides. I've been doing research on all these and the Mississippian ones. Don't really know what they're being used for. The cross-hatching is not typical what you would use for an abrader, for sharpening needles or things like that. Those get kind of a tapered groove in varying depth and various angles, and on the pieces of rock are very irregular as well. So there's something symbolic here too. In the case of the Cahokia birdman, showing a man wearing a bird-like mask, holding a wing up to one side in a dancing posture. And here's another one from not too far south of here, down in Monroe County. But it shows, again, a body of a man, and he's got this sort of kilt-like affair, very similar to what you see here, holding a wing up to one side, but there's no head, but a design that comes across that some people think represents a snake, others think it represents a feather. Hard to say. And why they're doing that, we don't know. The cross-hatching is a little more irregular. This one that's at the Quincy Museum in Illinois came from Cahokia, just somewhere west of Monk's Mound. But you can see, again, we're seeing the kilt affair here, and there's a wing, and there's actually if you look, that's a talon that's coming off. So again, a birdman-like figure. The Ramey tablet here came from Cahokia. Madison County Historical Museum has it. But it's showing two human heads on one side, the opposite side, two woodpecker heads. And these are often associated with warriors or maybe severed heads in this case. The woodpecker is often thought to have some kind of a warrior connection as well, and has the striped pole kind of design in the center, sort of the link between the upper world and the lower world. So a lot of symbolism involved, but we also find lots of others that are just less well made, not as symbolic looking. So I'm trying to figure out what their function might have been. And there was one that was found in a context that might help when they were doing the excavations for the Interpretive Center at Cahokia Mounds. There was one that was found associated with a sweat lodge. So what I'm wondering is maybe these were used to roughen the skin or prepare the skin or to wipe the sweat off. It's a possibility because they don't normally show a lot of wear, like you're braiding something rough. So I think that many of them are used in maybe that kind of situation, or for grading something that is vegetable material or something that is soft, not hard, because we very rarely show any evidence of wear on them. So,
Bill, as an interpreter, I think we were told that we should tell people that the cross-hatching on the birdman tablet was snakeskin.
I've never got through my explanation, I guess. So we got the upper world represented by the man, or by the bird, the middle world represented by the man, and the lower world represented by the snake, the snake skin. So again, some of these that have those combinations we think are ritual pieces. Stone pallets are kind of rare. They're most common down in the South, especially in Alabama area and Mississippi. Although this one is from Middle Woodland period, found in Illinois, has the hand represented on it. This one has two snakes with feline-type faces, sort of intertwined, but they have rattles on the end that are representative of a rattlesnake. again associated with the lower world, underworld. This one up here, very similar, has two of these feline-faced snakes with the rattles, but there's this hand figure in the middle with an OG symbol on it. It's often thought to represent a portal into the other world, and maybe representing a constellation. The Orion constellation is often represented with a hand in a lot of native mythology.
Any conjecture as to why the snakes would have the feline faces?
It's sort of it's an underworld figure. It's kind of like like the Piasaw has a combination of animal parts. So it's sort of a mythological creature, often associated with the lower world, the underworld. And so the cat monster is often depicted in a lot of Mississippian art. And I'll show some pottery that has that symbol. But there are people who get more serious in studying those kinds of things and making interpretations. I'm not one of them. But there are people who do study a lot of this symbolism and try and interpret what it means.
Bill,
Yeah.
have you seen those videos of the panthers that dive 20 and 30 feet?
No.
Yeah, they're down in Mexico apparently, and I saw one about a year ago, but they dive 20 or 30 feet deep down and hit their prey, and then come back up, and it's unbelievable.
Huh.
But as soon as I saw that, that's what I thought of.
Yeah.
The underwater panther.
Right. Interesting. Now this one, and usually the opposite side of these often have pigment stains, so it's like they're mixing pigments for body painting or tattooing. So these seem to have that kind of a function. This one has that kind of stripe pole motif with skull-like head figures here. Here's what we call a bilobed arrow, and I'll mention that a couple more times. Here's a couple more of these hands with the OG motif. And this one is actually, at least in part, a moth figure. And again, this figures into the cosmology and mythology of a lot of the Mississippian folks. Oops, wrong one. These are primarily kind of archaic period, mostly 3000 and 1000 BC, what we call plummets. There's a lot of conjecture about how they're used. Most people think they're kind of weights for sinkers or for fish nets and things like that. I know Larry thinks that they're used as weights for some of the weaving purposes. All things are possible. The boat stones are probably more a form of atlatl weight. The gorgets here are ornamental pieces, most likely hung around the neck. Birdstones also probably tied on to atlatls as atlatl weights. And they really like this banded slate for a lot of these kind of groundstone materials. So they're kind of ornamental in a way, but some, like these, would probably have some function as well. Spuds, we saw ones that were chipped out of stone. These are groundstone spuds. This one came from the Cahokia site. Some of these are from the spiral mounds in Oklahoma. This one was found in Cahokia, Illinois. Some of the others, I'm not sure exactly where they're all from. But again, they have this sort of uniform type of shape. Some a little more subtle, but this sort of head-like shape, which people call them spuds because they thought they were used like tools for, taking bark off trees and things. And they could certainly function that way, but again, these are probably more ritual items that are symbols of rank and authority that were held by leaders.
Bill,
Yep.
these are all stone.
These are all, these are all stone. The types of stone, I'm not positive on some. Some are like diorite or even a fine-grained granite. Some that I've seen. Others are. This one, I forget. There's a more technical name for it, but it's. But I can't think of it right now. But yeah, they're all stone. So they're all pecked and ground into those shapes.
Like jade.
It's not jade, no. It's a very soft type of stone, almost like a slate. And what we call monolithic axes. Now this shows what a regular axe would look like, as Larry can attest to, with his canoe project. And come in all different sizes, obviously, but these are, again, ritual variations of that, showing how, and it really helps us understand how stones were inserted into wooden handles. Of course, but these are all one solid piece of rock that's been carved into these shapes. And this one has engraved motifs on it. This one kind of what they call the alligator. Kind of looks like alligator teeth there. But these would not be functional as axes, but again, symbolic versions of them. Banner stones, and these are just a few examples. Tremendous variety in shapes and styles. And again, banded slate is a very popular material, granite, a real fine grained granite. A lot of these are kind of what we call rose quartz, and other, obviously, different types. Sometimes they're like this porphyry here. They're looking for special colors and special types of stone. Again, these are mostly weights that are on the atlatl, as Larry has tested and published about. It helps take the stress off the arm when you're poised out in the woods waiting for a deer to come by. And we stand out there with the long spear with a point on the end. These muscles start to shiver and quake, but with the atlatl weight at the back, it helps to relieve that tension. And but also, these were probably like charm stones for the people who made them. These were their prized possessions. Imagine the amount of time it would take to carve these and drill them so they could be mounted on the handle of the atlatl, or spear thrower. I'm assuming most people know what an atlatl is, but I don't have a picture of one tonight. And pipes, all kinds of, the whole zoo is here, and this is really a unique one here. These are mostly middle woodland, although the one over here is a Adena period, a little bit earlier than the Hopewell or middle woodland, and that's more of a tubular pipe, and it looks like it's representing a shaman. But you can see him wearing ear spools, a kind of a unique hairstyle, some kind of garment here with a bustle on the back, and a lot of people think he's representing a dwarf as well. And in a lot of the Indian societies, the people who have these misformed bodies, whatever, are thought to have special powers. And so they're often some of the shamans or medicine men, if you wish, of these societies. The beaver here has freshwater pearls inset in the eyes and bone to simulate the teeth. Here's where a mouthpiece would be inserted, a cane most likely, to this hole, and the tobacco will go on the upper back. These two look like dogs. This is an otter, two different shapes, one facing out and one facing toward the smoker. Very unique water bird here, kind of a whimsical one here. The shape of the stone, I guess, inspired the artist who made it. It's in the shape of a big toe. And that was found at Cahokia. Then more typical elbow-shaped pipe from a late woodland site. and these are all carved out of stone. And then the catlinite disc pipe from the Olneo period, probably around 1500 or so. But if you like birds, and these are found mostly in the Ohio area and the Illinois Valley, but also in other Hopewell sites in the south. But again, very obviously an owl here, then probably hawks or falcons represented here, raptors. This is a raven. These are herons, or this one is, and he's actually eating a fish. If you could see it from top down, there's a fish there. Roseate spoonbill sitting on top of a fish. Double-headed goose heads here. So 2 people could smoke this pipe. But again, these are all made by pecking and grinding. A lot of grinding. And scraping and carving with probably flint tools as well to get the details in. Figurines, both human and animal, are most common during the Mississippian period. What we call the chunky player pipe. I talked about the chunky stone in the game earlier. It shows him getting ready to roll one. Here he has short versions of the shafts that were thrown, or spears that were thrown at the rolling stone. Necklace ornament, ear spool, bun-like hairstyle, which is one of the more common things we see in a lot of the Mississippian artwork. This represents, again, we think maybe some kind of a shaman holding a rattle. He's in a crouched position. But here's a frog that has the same kind of thing, holding a rattle. So maybe this is like a transformer, showing the change from animal to human or vice versa. Then we have warrior symbols. Again, these are carved out of stone. This very detailed one, and both these from the Spiral Mound in Oklahoma, shows what we call the conquering warrior, wearing his padded armor on his back and front, on his arms and his legs, and around his head, and has a crouched captive who he's hitting in the head with one of those stone knives like I showed you earlier, probably to decapitate him. This one similar, not as detailed. It's really hard to see the captive down here, but you can see how these have been drilled for pipes. We think most of these that we're showing in this reddish colored stone are made at Cahokia, because the source for that stone, that red stone, is just west of St. Louis. And we think they're being made here and then transported elsewhere as the Cahokia, if you want to call them missionaries, are going out spreading the word, or perhaps through their trade between the elites, the rulers of the communities, are exchanging these exotic items. This one came from around the Cahokia area. This one up along Piasaw Creek, I think in Calhoun County. This one was from Oklahoma. These are from Oklahoma. But again, probably all made here at Cahokia. Some additional ones. This one found down in Tennessee. This one in southern Illinois. It just shows a warrior crouching behind a shield. This one found near Caseyville, up on the bluffs. Looks like a person holding a smaller, maybe a child. Others think it's, again, a larger than normal person holding, a captive or enemy. And this really dynamic one here is actually very large, about this size, and often referred to as big boy in the common parlance, or the seated warrior. But a lot of interesting detail. Like if you look at the hair bun here and the way the hair is rolled with some kind of a special attachment here. The braid, which is probably an artificial braid that is attached. we think we're representing a culture hero known as Redhorn or Morning Star, and who's talked the red horn is represented by the red braid here. In his ears, what we call short-nosed godmass. There's also a variety called long-nosed godmass that come out a little bit the longer nose. And on his back, a cape. There's various interpretations of what the cape is, whether it's feathers, whether it's scalps, whether it's raccoon skins. Depends on who you talk to. But again, this was found at Spiral Mound in Oklahoma in the main burial chamber. And this is really an exotic, unusual piece. The Burger figurine from the BBB motor site here in Collinsville, pretty much where Interstate 255 and Interstate 70 come together now. Excavations there. They had road grader equipment out, and the archaeologist was walking behind the grader, and he saw this red thing. He thought it was a piece of brick, and it was actually this head. He turned it over and saw the face. So they had to stop that big belly scraper, dump all the dirt in the pile in one place, and then all the archaeologists got out there, went through the whole pile, and they went back to where he had been grading, and they found the bottom part is still in a small pit, apparently. Never found the back of the head. But shows a female figure kneeling behind a snake figure with a cat-like face, again, with the fangs or the canines like a cat would have. In her right hand, she's holding a hoe. You can even see how it's lashed on or tied on to the L-shaped handle. And she's hoeing the back of that snake, which is probably earth symbolism, and she's the earth mother. And she's cultivating that snake, and behind that, then the tail becomes two vines that climb up her back with gourds or squashes on them. And I think Gail's figured out their cushaw squashes, and she's wearing a pack on her back. So again, this is the fertility symbolism, the earth mother. They found a lot of these kind of female figurines in this area. Not so many of the male ones at this point. Those seem to show up more further south. Another one that came from a site right near the BBB motor site, kind of blew up in a fire. You can see all the fractured pieces have been glued back together, and the different colorations are from that way they're exposed to the fire. But again, it shows a female figure. In her hands, some kind of a stalk. And here's one from Arkansas, very similar. And some people think it's corn. I know Gail still argues against it because there are certain characteristics here that are not typical of a corn plant, but we don't know what else it represents. There's another vine that comes up here, and there's a sunflower at the back of her head, and a basket behind her. And we see that kind of basket thing in several different configurations. And when they first found this one, the color figurine, which is also at the BBB motor site, there was our debate whether it's representing a cloud and rain, whether it represents a grinding stone. But I think the consensus now that it's a basket that's a sacred bundle. And this fits into a lot of the cosmology that we have some documentation for the Mississippians. Others have a bowl, and some of these have been modified into pipes, as you can see. This looks like a female figure, again, kneeling with the sort of wraparound skirt. That's very typical of the female figures, that kneeling posture. And some people think this is a hoe that's hanging over her shoulder, that sort of L shape. But it's been, you don't have the detail like you see in some of these others in the facial configuration. This small one here came from the East St. Louis excavations. It's only about this big, 2-3 inches tall. But it shows a young woman with a shell cup in her hand, and almost looks like stuff is pouring out of it. It's been suggested that this may represent the black drink that was used in ceremonies. That maybe the women were responsible for preparing the black drink and presented it to the warriors or the males. But there's always room for interpretation on a lot of these things. This one is called the Corn Mother. She actually has an ear of corn in her hand. This is from Spiral Mounds in Oklahoma. This one came from up in the Illinois Valley. And the others are from this area. This one is not that reddish stone. It's more of a limestone. So it's a little bit different material. Some other figurines from throughout the Mississippian world, many different locations. In this case, looks like a captive warrior who's kneeling, but his arms are bound behind him. And this one has a similar posture and may also represent a bound warrior. This is actually a crayfish. If you look at it from different angles, you can see the resemblance, especially the tail part of it. Crayfish is very lobster-looking. But this was found, even though it was probably made of Cahokia, it was found near Mobile, Alabama. Some of these came from the Illinois Valley. You can see a different kind of facial treatment than we've seen on some of these others. Different kind of hairstyle, this kind of blocky look to it. This one I think is from Spiro or from Oklahoma. These were from the Kincaid Mound site down in southern Illinois. This one's been partially restored. But again, these are all stone carvings. This one's from Ohio. It's just a face. But this shows the variety in types of hairstyles and ornament and clothing and decoration and artistic styles, depending what area you're from. This one shows, again, a female figure in that kind of wraparound skirt with a kind of unique hairstyle and some kind of a wrap on the head. This was found at Cahokia. This is a replica of it, or cast of it. But it shows a very similar kind of hairstyle, this headband, I guess you'd call it. Not sure what he has in his mouth. Almost looks like a snake. But wish we could see the rest of it, but that was the only part that was found. This one I think was from maybe from Shiloh Mounds in Tennessee. This one, these two from Spiro Mound in Oklahoma, actually show pipe smokers. So it shows here's one of those frog effigy pipes like we've seen. And he's got the tube, the mouthpiece, and he's actually smoking that pipe. And notice again the kind of different hairstyles here, the hair bun, this time a double bun. This one shows a person smoking an elbow-shaped pipe. We can see some pigment on it as well around the eye area, but also a very unusual kind of hairstyle here. This one came from Arkansas, and there's some debate about what he's holding in his hand. Some people think it's a cup to drink the black drink out of the bowl here. Others say it's a sacred bundle. Others say that it was a cylindrical type of chunky stone. We don't really know. These marble, and sometimes you see couples, male and female. This these here are actually about this tall. They're made out of marble, and they're found at the Etowah site in Georgia. But you can see there's remnants of the pigments on the eyes and on the ears. And same here. This one I think is more of a sandstone, but you can see facial painting or tattooing represented, and the male and the female. And then these sort of kneeling figures are very common in the area of southernmost Illinois and Indiana and Kentucky, Tennessee area, and probably showing a particular culture hero in their cosmology. This one made out of fluorite. It was very rare to see something that big carved out of fluorite. It's a mineral that comes from Kentucky and maybe the southern part of Illinois. And one carved out of sandstone here. A lot of these in that southeastern complex area have this kind of open mouth representation that's very typical of that area. Pottery, lots of fancy pottery. That could be probably several programs, but just trying to show some of the prime examples here. Again, we talked about the underwater monster, or the cat monster, and that's what's represented here, with a cat-like face and a sort of a coiled tail, a bottle and a bowl. And this one is very unique. Only one I've ever seen quite like that. It came from Arkansas. And they actually carved out those shapes and designs in that one. The earlier pottery that we see a lot of ornamentation on is from the Hopewell period, again, about 2,000 years ago. And again, we see stylized versions of birds. Like here's the roseate spoonbill represented here, some kind of a long-necked raptor here. Then there's just sort of the stylized zoned patterns that we see in many different varieties during the Hopewell period. And these are more often associated with burial rituals as opposed to the common wares. The beaver effigy there shows a beaver holding a stick in his hand, chewing on it. And there's several varieties of that have been found. That actually came from the Cahokia area. And here we have a bottle with the head of a bear on it. So these are mostly Mississippian, and these are mostly Middle Woodland or Hopewell. Again, mostly Mississippian and Caddoan. The Caddoan area is mostly like Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, parts of Louisiana. And this one came from Cahokia, but it's a motif or design that we see often coming from the Caddoan area in the southern Mississippi Valley. Effigy pots or bowls. This one with a duck effigy. It looks like a wood duck, which have that kind of crest on them. But actually, the head is hollow and there's rattles in the head. So you shake it, it rattles. Human effigy here. Kind of unique trilobe bottle there with 3 human figures on it. The hand and crossbone, or arm bones. Again, kind of a mortuary motif or a death motif here. This probably represents the tree of life. Fattened dog here. And a double-spouted double dog area there. The radium motif is often associated with Cahokia, this style of pot with that incised design and variations of that design on the shoulder area. And that then spreads from the Cahokia area into other parts of the Mississippian world. And this one is actually one bowl or one vessel, but it shows how they would often stack a bottle on top of a jar there. served like a lid, and I'm sure that they did that in their households as well, but this is a stylized representation of that. Beakers, mug-like vessels. They've done some testing of these, and they show residues from the black drink, which is made from a type of holly plant that's more grown mostly in the southern states, so they had to import the leaves from that to make the tea like a drink that's very stimulating type of drink. Often warriors would drink this before going off to battle or before having rituals they were involved in. And the biological name is Ilex vomitoria, because oftentimes it does make you purge. So there's probably used to cleanse the body and the soul at the same time in preparation for these events. And some of them have this motif that we often associate with the solar symbol, with the radiating lines, and the earth symbol in the middle of the circle with the cross in it. And this is one that was found at Woodhenge at Cahokia, and this one is very similar. Has the one at Cahokia, the line comes in from this side without the break and exits on the other side with the line continuing. So some people suggest this represents the winter solstice, sunrise, and sunset. And having found that at the Woodhenge area, has been suggested that might be what's related here. But you can see very similar kinds of motifs. Again, some kind of radiating rays coming off of these, ladder-like designs on the sides. So there's a certain commonality to all of these, but again, they appear to be used for drinking this black drink in ritual activities. Female figures are very common in southeast, especially from Cahokia south, but mainly in southeastern Missouri and Arkansas and associated areas. And it's thought that they're representing the kind of Earth Mother figure. In some of the cosmology, they talk about the old woman who never dies, but they do share certain characteristics. They usually have very skinny arms, as you can see, prominent collarbones, and some are younger, some are older, so probably showing different stages of life. And this mother nursing a baby here came from East St. Louis. And so these are all bottles. Their openings are at the back of the head, used for some kind of, again, special drink. The only other figurines we see earlier in time, there are some Hopewell figurines, the night figurines from up in, I guess it was Calhoun County, again showing a nursing mother, another woman carrying a child, and just in a resting posture here. And these are small. They're only maybe about 3 or 4 inches tall. And but it's one of the examples that help us understand how they wore their hair, how they dressed, the kinds of ornaments and things they might have or not have. And again, helps us understand something about their belief system as well. The head pots, mostly from Arkansas and southeast Missouri, often kind of depict probably young warriors, but they also look like they're deceased. The eyes are kind of pinched shut, the lips are kind of drawn back in a death grin. They also represent tattooing with the various designs and motifs that you see represented here. So people of different status or rank or different clans probably had certain symbols they could wear and no one else could. Some are just plain, like you see here. But they're kind of focused to that particular area, mostly of eastern Arkansas. Just another variety of the vessel forms. The red and white painting is, again, more typical of that Caddoan area, and it's kind of, some of those are kind of late in the Mississippian period, up until from 13 to 1500s, or even a little bit later in some cases. This one came from Fulton County in Illinois. Shows a dog effigy, but again, this kind of motif, the scroll, but the excising of these patterns or these designs is often more typical down in the Caddoan area. So it shows there's a lot of communication between these different areas. Copper is another material that was often used, and the copper originates from around Lake Superior, was imported throughout much of the Midwest, where the nuggets of copper are heated and hammered until they get in and flattened out into the thin sheets. And often these are cut out into various ornamental patterns. Of course, when they're new, they'd be very bright and shiny, like a new penny would be, copper colored. But over time, they oxidize and turn this greenish color. But there's, figurines of faces. Here's a copper representation of a bear claw with a freshwater pearl in it. Pendants that were ornaments that were worn, again, probably in various ceremonies. This is a type of fish. It's in the sucker family. It's a bottom-dwelling fish. It's in copper. These are some fully copper ear spools. The ones we saw in the Mississippian times were stone, but we had a copper foil on them, where these are solid copper. But some of the oldest tools and things up in the northern and the Great Lakes area from the old copper complex, they were using it mainly for tools, for knives and axes, spear points, and things like that. The Mississippians did some elaborate repoussé copper. These figures here from the Etowah site in Georgia. This one depicts, here's an illustration, a man in a dancing posture holding one of those maces in his hand. It's probably a copper one rather than a stone one. The bilobed arrow we've talked about was a type of headdress ornament, but it shows wings on the back. So this is a hawk dancer, falcon dancer. This one from the Peoria area just shows the falcon itself. This from Dixon Mounds. This is from the Spiro site. It shows a bird with a rattle on the end and more of a different kind of animal type face. These long-nosed god masquettes would be ear ornaments. That was found at the Mepin Mound site in Illinois. And down in the southern part of Illinois, this copper plate was found that shows two dancers connected by ropes or strings to something in the upper world. Yep. Then these are some of the copper plaques from the Boot Hill in Missouri. Shows a falcon again figure with the wings. And this is a two-headed bird here, and this shows a falcon with a man's head on it. Notice they often have this kind of forked eye motif that's often associated with falcons, the feather pattern around their, and other raptors around their eyes. So again, it has that kind of warrior symbolism. And this one from the Spiro Mound site, very similar. Then these from Spiro as well. And this one's kind of hard to see, but there's that forked eye motif like you see here. So there's the eye, there's the nose, there's the mouth, there's the ear spool like you see here, and some kind of a feather coming out of a bun on the back of the head like you see here. So imagine the amount of work it took to pound the copper nuggets into some of these sheets are about this size. All kinds of things made out of shell. These are mostly gorgets. They're round things that be suspended around the neck. Spider motifs are common. That's often more associated with females. But also here's a warrior, again a dancer with a mace in one hand and a head in the other hand. So a successful warrior. Dancers here with feather shields and gourd rattles and raccoon pelts around their waist, and again the striped pole motif that we see. Here's one of these short-faced short-nosed god masks. This one has 4 woodpecker motifs. This is probably a falcon and a jaguar or other type of cat figure in combat. Relates to the late woodland period. And again, various types of shell beads. These are all made from the whelk shell that came from the Gulf of Mexico. And they cut these pieces out and shaped them. And these are examples of cups that have been found. These are mostly from the Spiro Mound site, which was looted back in the 30s, and then Oklahoma did some excavations there in the late 30s. But one of these pieces here ended up in Oklahoma Museum, another one in North Carolina, the other half of it. So this is an artist's representation of what's putting those, if you had those two pieces together, what the motif would be. Dugout canoe. Probably an eagle figure here. These are probably armadillos. Human figure with a lot of tattooing on the body and wearing a shell bead necklace with a part of a whelk shell hanging from it. What they call the beaded forelock motif, the forked eye motif, the ear spool. So again, a lot of things we see from these kinds of figures help us understand more about what some of their ritual activity and some of their beliefs were. Again, some more of these cups were found. There was a big pile of them in the central chamber at the main burial mound at Spiro. Again, the sort of the tree of life represented here. A dancer with a forked pole, wearing a woodpecker head on his belt. 4 of these feathered serpent going around a world symbol. They sort of form like a swastika in their shape, so representing probably the 4 winds or the 4 cardinal directions. A hand motif with the eye symbol on the, looks like the back of the palm. Bone, all kinds of things, especially needles and pins and fish hooks, and even some spear points, etc. Oftentimes they would take the canines of a bear or a wolf or a dog and insert the freshwater pearls. Sometimes they made imitation teeth from a bone or an antler. So some of these are real teeth and some are imitations. This is a part of a comb. Part of it's gone by now, but you can see the shape there. Minerals. Mica came from the southern Appalachians, mostly used during the middle woodland period. They found huge deposits and finished artifacts, obviously a hand, that's about the actual size of it. Snake, human figure, and representation of an atlatl here. Quartz, 2-headed feline or cat figures here. And this represents the pupa of a moth. The canonical figure from the Kincaid Mounds in southern Illinois looks like a man with a falcon-type nose. So again, a birdman representation here. A jasper, it's very stylized, but some people say that looks like a parakeet. Very similar ones have been found at Poverty Point site from about 1500 BC that look like more of a locust. So this gives you an idea. They were just using everything they could. Lots of wood things don't survive. In some cases, like the anthropomorphic cat figure here, and this probably a coyote or a dog figure or wolf figure. These came from the Key Marco site in Florida. Most of these other figures, this one came from spiral mounds, and this one here, and this one here. This was carved wood, and mostly these are cedar, the sacred wood for many people. This one had sheet, still has part of the sheet copper applied over the top of it. This one came from the Powell Mound at the Cahokia site. It was an ear ornament. This one came from up in Fulton County, Illinois. Cedar, but you can still see some green staining, so it also had copper coating or sheet on it at one time. But this is what we usually find. So trying to show you a lot of the really neat things that we wish we could find all the time. But again, it shows the great variety in materials and artistic ability of the Native American people through time here in the eastern U.S. So thank you. If you want to browse through these books before you leave, you can